Marcus Chen had been walking for 3 days straight through the wasteland that used to be downtown Seattle. His boots were falling apart and the last of his water had run out that morning. The other survivors from the underground bunkers had kicked him out again. This was the 4th time in 2 months. Freak, they called him. Mutation. Not one of us anymore. Marcus looked at his hands. The skin had a slight shimmer to it now, almost like scales, but not quite. His eyes had changed color too, from brown to a deep amber that seemed to glow in the dark. The changes had started 6 months ago, right after the alien ships arrived and began their bombardment of Earth. Most humans who got exposed to the strange radiation from the alien weapons died within hours. Marcus had been caught in a direct blast when the ships hit his apartment building. Everyone expected him to die. Instead, he woke up 3 days later in the rubble, completely unharmed but changed. The other survivors were afraid of him. They thought he might be infected with something alien. They thought he might turn into one of the monsters that now roamed the ruined cities. So they kept throwing him out of their safe zones. Marcus didn't blame them. He was scared too. He didn't understand what was happening to his body. Sometimes he could hear things from miles away. Sometimes he could see in complete darkness. And lately, he had been having strange dreams about flying through clouds and breathing fire. As the sun began to set behind the broken skyline, Marcus found shelter in what used to be a small restaurant. The windows were blown out and tables and chairs were scattered everywhere. He made himself a bed out of some old cushions in the corner and tried to ignore his growling stomach. That's when he heard it, a low rumbling sound that seemed to come from deep underground. At first, Marcus thought it might be another survivor, maybe trapped in a basement. But as he listened more carefully, the sound was too deep, too powerful to be human. Marcus grabbed a piece of broken pipe as a weapon and followed the sound outside. It was coming from an alley behind the restaurant. As he crept closer, he could hear something else mixed in with the rumbling. It sounded almost like whimpering. He turned the corner and stopped dead in his tracks. There, wedged between 2 collapsed buildings, was a dragon. Marcus had seen pictures of the creatures in the news before the communication networks went down. The aliens hadn't just brought weapons to Earth, they had brought monsters. Dragons were some of the worst. They were supposed to be huge, aggressive beasts that could melt through tank armor with their breath and tear apart buildings with their claws. But this dragon was different. It was smaller than the ones in the news reports, maybe only about 12 feet long, and it was clearly hurt. One of its wings was twisted at an odd angle, and there was a deep gash along its side that was bleeding a dark, almost black blood. The dragon's eyes met Marcus's, and he expected to see rage or hunger. Instead, he saw something that looked almost human. Pain, fear, and something else that took Marcus a moment to recognize. Loneliness. The dragon tried to move when it saw Marcus, but it could barely lift its head. It let out a weak growl that sounded more like a plea than a threat. Marcus knew he should run. This was exactly the kind of alien monster that had helped destroy his world. But as he looked at the injured creature, all he could think about was how the other survivors looked at him, like he was something dangerous and unwanted. "You're hurt pretty bad, aren't you?" Marcus said softly, taking a step closer. The dragon's eyes followed his movement, but it didn't try to attack. If anything, it seemed to relax slightly at the sound of his voice. Marcus looked around the alley and spotted something useful. There was a broken fire hydrant nearby that was still trickling water. He found a relatively clean piece of metal that could work as a bowl and filled it with water. "I don't know if you drink water like we do," Marcus said, approaching the dragon slowly. "But you look pretty dehydrated." He set the makeshift bowl down a few feet away from the dragon's head. The creature sniffed at it cautiously, then began to drink. As it drank, Marcus got a better look at its injuries. The wing was definitely broken, and the cut on its side was deep enough that Marcus could see what looked like ribs underneath. But what worried him most was how thin the dragon looked. When was the last time it had eaten? Marcus felt around in his backpack. He had been saving his last can of food for an emergency, but looking at this injured creature, he figured this qualified. It was a can of beef stew that he had found in an abandoned grocery store. "I don't suppose you eat human food," Marcus said, opening the can with his knife. "But this is all I've got." He dumped the contents of the can into another piece of metal and slid it over to the dragon. The creature sniffed at it for a long moment, then began to eat. It ate slowly, carefully, like it hadn't had food in days. As the dragon ate, Marcus noticed something strange happening. The shimmer in his own skin seemed to be getting brighter, and he felt a warm sensation in his chest. It wasn't unpleasant, more like the feeling of sitting near a campfire on a cold night. When the dragon finished eating, it looked directly at Marcus and made a sound he hadn't heard before. It was softer than its earlier growls, almost musical. Then it lowered its great head and closed its eyes. Marcus realized the dragon was going to sleep right there in the alley. He should leave, find somewhere else to spend the night. But something kept him there. Maybe it was the fact that this was the first creature in months that hadn't looked at him with fear or disgust. Or maybe it was something else, something he couldn't quite explain. He settled down against the opposite wall of the alley, keeping his distance but staying close enough to keep watch. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus could have sworn he heard the dragon making a sound that reminded him of a cat purring. For the first time in months, Marcus didn't feel completely alone. Marcus woke up to the sound of heavy breathing right next to his ear. His eyes snapped open and he found himself staring directly into the amber eyes of the dragon. The creature had moved during the night and was now lying just a few feet away from him. Marcus's first instinct was to scramble away, but something made him hold still. The dragon wasn't showing any signs of aggression. If anything, it looked almost curious as it studied Marcus's face. "Good morning to you too," Marcus said quietly, sitting up slowly. The dragon made that musical sound again, and Marcus noticed that its breathing seemed easier than it had the night before. The gash on its side had stopped bleeding, and while the wing was still clearly broken, the creature seemed stronger overall. Marcus's stomach growled loudly, reminding him that he had given away his last food to the dragon. He would need to find something to eat soon or he would be in serious trouble. The dragon seemed to understand. It lifted its head and made a different sound, almost like it was trying to communicate something specific. Then it began to move, dragging itself toward the mouth of the alley. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked, following behind. The dragon stopped at the entrance to the alley and looked back at Marcus expectantly. It was clear that it wanted him to follow, but Marcus hesitated. Going out into the open during the day was dangerous. The alien ship still patrolled the skies, and there were other creatures out there that were much less friendly than this injured dragon. But the dragon kept looking at him with those intelligent eyes, and Marcus found himself unable to say no. "All right," he said, "but if we get killed, I'm blaming you." The dragon moved slowly through the ruined streets, stopping frequently to rest. Marcus stayed close beside it, ready to help if it fell. As they walked, he noticed that other creatures seemed to avoid them. A pack of the twisted wolf-like beasts that had appeared after the alien attacks took one look at the dragon and disappeared into the shadows. After about an hour of walking, the dragon led Marcus to what used to be a large grocery store. The roof had partially collapsed, but the building was still mostly intact. The dragon positioned itself at the entrance and made another one of its sounds. Marcus understood. It was standing guard while he went inside to look for food. The inside of the store was a mess, but Marcus had gotten good at scavenging over the past few months. He found several cans of food that were still good, some bottles of water, and even a first aid kit that hadn't been touched. When he came back outside, the dragon was exactly where he had left it, watching the street carefully. Marcus noticed that its presence seemed to have a calming effect on the area. Even the ever-present sound of distant alien machinery seemed quieter. "Found some good stuff," Marcus said, showing the dragon his haul, "and I found something that might help with that wing." Marcus had discovered a roll of medical tape and some lightweight metal splints in the first aid kit. He wasn't sure if dragon bones worked the same way as human bones, but it was worth a try. The dragon seemed to understand what Marcus wanted to do. It stretched out its injured wing and held perfectly still while Marcus carefully examined the break. It was a clean fracture, which was good news. With the right support, it should heal properly. Working as gently as he could, Marcus positioned the splints along the dragon's wing bone and secured them with the medical tape. The dragon never moved or made a sound of complaint, even when Marcus had to manipulate the broken bone back into proper alignment. "There," Marcus said when he was finished. "It's not perfect, but it should heal straight now." The dragon flexed its wing carefully, testing the splint. Then it turned to Marcus and did something that made his heart skip a beat. The dragon gently touched its snout to Marcus's forehead, like a cat nuzzling against its owner. The moment of contact sent a shock through Marcus's entire body. The warm feeling in his chest exploded into something much stronger, and for just a second, he could have sworn he felt what the dragon was feeling. Gratitude, affection, and something else that felt almost like recognition. When the dragon pulled away, Marcus noticed that the shimmer in his skin was much brighter now, and his amber eyes seemed to be glowing with their own light. "What's happening to me?" he whispered. The dragon made another sound, this one longer and more complex than the others. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but somehow he understood the meaning. The dragon was trying to explain something important. Before Marcus could ask any more questions, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. The high-pitched whine of alien ship engines coming from somewhere overhead. The dragon heard it too. Its entire body went rigid and its head swiveled toward the sky. Then it did something that Marcus didn't expect. Instead of trying to hide or run away, the dragon positioned itself between Marcus and the sound of the approaching ships. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked, but the dragon was already moving. Despite its injured wing, the dragon managed to spread both wings wide, creating a shield between Marcus and the sky. The shimmer that had been growing in Marcus's skin suddenly flared to life, creating a pattern that matched the scales on the dragon's hide. The alien ship passed overhead, its scanners sweeping the ground below. But something strange happened. The scanners seemed to pass right over them as if they weren't there at all. Marcus held his breath until the ship was gone. When the sound of its engines faded into the distance, the dragon folded its wings and turned to look at him. "Did you just hide us from their sensors?" Marcus asked. The dragon made that musical sound again, and this time Marcus was sure he heard something like amusement in it. As they made their way back to the alley, Marcus's mind was racing. The changes in his body, the connection he felt with the dragon, the way the alien scanners had failed to detect them, it all had to be connected somehow. "You know what's happening to me, don't you?" Marcus said as they settled back into their shelter. The dragon looked at him for a long moment, then began to make a series of sounds that were more complex than anything Marcus had heard from it before. He couldn't understand the individual sounds, but somehow the meaning was becoming clearer. The dragon was trying to tell him that the changes weren't random. They weren't a mutation or an infection. They were something else entirely. As the day wore on, Marcus found himself understanding more and more of what the dragon was trying to communicate. It was as if a door in his mind was slowly opening, revealing knowledge that had always been there but had been locked away. By evening, Marcus was beginning to understand the truth. The radiation from the alien weapons hadn't mutated him. It had awakened something that had been dormant in his DNA for thousands of years, something that connected him to the dragons, something that might be humanity's only hope for survival. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus first found the dragon in the alley. The creature's wing was healing well, and it was now able to move around much more easily. But more importantly, the communication between them had grown stronger each day. Marcus had stopped thinking of the dragon as it. Through their growing connection, he had learned that the dragon was male and had something like a name. The closest Marcus could come to pronouncing it was Paraxis, though the actual sound involved harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. In return, Paraxis had learned to say Marcus in a way that sounded like wind rushing through a cave. It was the most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard. The physical changes in Marcus were accelerating. The shimmer in his skin had developed into actual scale-like patterns that appeared and disappeared depending on his emotional state. His amber eyes now glowed noticeably in the dark, and he had discovered that he could see heat signatures like thermal imaging. More disturbing were the changes he couldn't see. His body temperature had risen to levels that should have killed him, but instead he felt more energetic than ever. His strength had increased dramatically. He could now lift pieces of concrete that would have required 3 men before. And twice he had accidentally breathed out small puffs of what looked like steam, though it was warm enough to melt plastic. "I'm turning into one of you, aren't I?" Marcus asked one evening as they shared another scavenged meal. Pyraxis made a sound that Marcus had learned meant something like, "Not exactly." Then the dragon began one of his longer explanations. Through a combination of sounds, gestures, and the strange mental connection they shared, Pyraxis told Marcus a story that changed everything he thought he knew about Earth's history. Dragons hadn't come to Earth with the alien invaders. They had been here all along, hidden in deep caves and ocean trenches, waiting. They were the original inhabitants of Earth, from a time before humans had evolved. But they weren't just animals. They were highly intelligent, with their own culture, their own technology, and their own understanding of the universe. Thousands of years ago, when early humans were still learning to use fire, a small group of dragons had taken pity on them. These dragons had shared some of their genetic material with certain human bloodlines, creating hybrids who could survive in harsh conditions and protect their communities. Most of these hybrid bloodlines had died out over the millennia, but some had survived, carrying dormant dragon genes that could be activated under extreme stress or exposure to certain types of energy. Energy exactly like the radiation from alien weapons. "So you're saying I'm part dragon?" Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Pyraxis made the sound that meant yes, then added something that made Marcus's blood run cold. He wasn't the only one. All over the world, humans who had survived direct exposure to alien attacks were beginning to change. Most didn't understand what was happening to them. Many were being killed by other humans who thought they were infected with alien viruses, but they were Earth's defense system, awakening after thousands of years of dormancy. "How many of us are there?" Marcus asked. Pyraxis didn't know exact numbers, but he estimated there might be several thousand scattered across the planet. The problem was that most of them were alone and frightened, just as Marcus had been. They needed to be found and brought together before they either died from lack of understanding about their changes or were killed by other humans. "And the dragons? Are there more of you?" This answer was more complicated. There were dragons all over the world, but they had been in hiding for so long that many had lost the ability to trust any surface dweller, human or otherwise. Pyraxis himself had only come to the surface because he had been injured during an alien attack on his colony's deep cave system. He had been wandering for weeks, growing weaker, when Marcus had found him. But if the human-dragon hybrids could prove themselves trustworthy, if they could show that they were true allies, then the dragons might be willing to come out of hiding and join the fight against the invaders. "How do we prove ourselves?" Marcus asked. Pyraxis stood up and walked to the edge of their makeshift shelter. He looked up at the sky, where the lights of alien ships could be seen moving between the clouds like deadly stars. The answer was simple. They had to start fighting back. Over the next few days, Pyraxis began to teach Marcus how to use his changing abilities. The scale patterns on his skin weren't just cosmetic. They could harden into armor that could deflect small arms fire. The heat building up in his body wasn't dangerous. It was fuel for weapons that human technology couldn't match. Marcus learned to focus the heat into concentrated beams that could cut through metal. He learned to enhance his already increased strength by channeling energy through his muscles. Most importantly, he learned to extend his new senses, allowing him to detect alien technology from miles away. But the most valuable thing Pyraxis taught him was how to call to other hybrids. It was a form of communication that worked on frequencies humans couldn't normally hear, but that the hybrid nervous system was perfectly tuned to receive. By sending out the right combination of sounds and mental energy, Marcus could potentially contact other people like him across vast distances. It might take time, Pyraxis warned, and some may be too frightened to respond. But Marcus had to try. The first time he attempted the call, sending out a mental message that essentially said, "I am like you, you are not alone," he nearly collapsed from the effort. The second time was easier. By the fifth time, 3 days later, he was beginning to get responses. The first came from somewhere to the south. A woman's mental voice, terrified and confused, asking if someone was really there or if she was going insane. The second came from the east, a man who had been hiding in the ruins of Portland, convinced that he was dying from some unknown disease. The third came from much further away, possibly as far as California. This person's mental voice was stronger, more controlled. They had been changing for months and had figured out some of their abilities on their own. Within a week, Marcus had made contact with 12 other hybrids scattered across the Pacific Northwest. Some were close enough that they could potentially meet in person. Others were too far away or in too much danger from other humans to travel. But they were all listening now. They were all learning, and they were all beginning to understand that they weren't victims of the alien attack. They were Earth's response to it. As Marcus lay down to sleep on his 20th night with Paraxis, he could feel something changing in the world around them. Other dragons were stirring in their deep places, sensing that the hybrid bloodlines were awakening. Some were curious, some were hopeful, and some, Paraxis warned him, were still angry about what had happened to their world. Tomorrow, they would start the real work. Tomorrow, they would begin to bring together the scattered children of two species and forge them into something that could stand against the alien invasion. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The first hybrid to reach them was a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus despite the shared surname. She arrived at their shelter 3 days after receiving Marcus's mental call, traveling nearly 40 miles through dangerous territory to get there. Marcus knew something was different about her the moment she stepped into the alley. Where his own changes were still developing, hers were much further advanced. Her skin had a permanent bronze shimmer that looked almost like scales, and her eyes glowed with a steady inner fire. When she spoke, small wisps of smoke escaped from her mouth. "I thought I was the only one," she said, staring at Marcus in amazement. "I thought I was going crazy." Sarah had been a marine biologist before the invasion. She had been studying deep-sea creatures in a research station off the coast of Oregon when the alien attacks began. The station had taken a direct hit, and she had been caught in an explosion that should have vaporized her. Instead, she had woken up 3 days later on the ocean floor, breathing water as easily as air. "I can hold my breath for over an hour now," she told them as they shared a meal that evening. "And the water doesn't feel cold anymore. I think I can actually breathe it if I need to." Paraxis was fascinated by Sarah's aquatic adaptations. Through their mental connection, he explained that some of the ancient dragons had lived in the oceans, and their hybrid descendants would naturally develop abilities suited to underwater environments. "There are dragons in the ocean?" Sarah asked, her eyes lighting up. Pyraxis confirmed that there were entire dragon cities beneath the waves, though they had been hidden from surface dwellers for even longer than the land-based dragons. If Sarah could make contact with them, it would open up possibilities that Marcus had never considered. The second hybrid to join them was very different. His name was David Park, and he had been a software engineer in Seattle before the invasion. His changes seemed to focus on mental abilities rather than physical ones. He could detect electronic signals with his mind, interfere with radio communications, and even hack into simple computer systems without touching them. "The alien technology operates on frequencies I can actually feel," David explained. "It's like their computers are singing, and I'm learning to sing back." But it was the third hybrid who really changed everything. She arrived 5 days after Sarah, and Marcus felt her presence long before he saw her. Her mental signature was incredibly strong, so powerful that it actually made Paraxis lift his head and stare in the direction she was coming from. Her name was Elena Vasquez, and she had been an Air Force pilot before the invasion. Her F-16 had been shot down during the first alien attack on Edwards Air Force Base. She had ejected at high altitude and should have died when her parachute was shredded by alien fire. Instead, she had somehow managed to fly the last 1,000 feet to the ground under her own power. When she walked into their camp, Marcus could see why. Elena's changes were the most dramatic of any of them. She had actual wings. They weren't full-sized yet, more like large fins that extended from her shoulder blades, but they were definitely functional. Her bones had become hollow like a bird's, making her incredibly light despite her obvious strength, and her eyes had developed a third eyelid that allowed her to see clearly even in hurricane-force winds. "I've been practicing," she said simply when Marcus stared at her wings. "I can glide for almost a mile now, and I'm getting better at gaining altitude." Pyraxis was more excited about Elena's arrival than Marcus had ever seen him. Through their connection, he explained that aerial hybrids were the rarest of all. In ancient times, they had been the communication links between dragon colonies, carrying messages across vast distances and coordinating defensive actions. "If she can learn to fly properly," Pyraxis told Marcus, "she can help us contact dragons all over the continent." But Elena had brought more than just her flying abilities. She had brought intelligence. During her weeks of traveling, she had been observing the alien forces from the air. She had mapped their patrol routes, identified their supply lines, and discovered something that none of the human military forces had figured out. The aliens aren't just randomly attacking, she explained, spreading out a hand-drawn map she had created. They're following a pattern. They're targeting specific geological features, deep caves, underwater trenches, places where dragons might be hiding. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They know about the dragons. More than that, Elena said. I think the dragons are the reason they came here in the first place. This revelation changed everything they thought they knew about the invasion. The aliens hadn't come to Earth to strip mine its resources or eliminate humanity. They had come to wipe out the dragons, and humans were just collateral damage. Pyraxis confirmed Elena's suspicions. Through their mental link, he shared images and memories that went back thousands of years. The aliens, called the Void Seekers in the ancient dragon language, were a nomadic species that traveled from world to world, destroying any life forms that could resist their expansion. Dragons were one of the few species they had never been able to completely eliminate. Wherever dragons evolved, they developed psychic abilities, energy manipulation, and most importantly, the ability to share their gifts with other species. The hybrid bloodlines weren't just a coincidence. They were a deliberate defense mechanism that dragons had developed over millions of years of evolution. When dragons found a world with promising young species, they would seed some of their genetic material into the local population, creating potential allies who could awaken if the Void Seekers ever found that world. So we're not just fighting to defend Earth, Marcus said, the full implications hitting him. We're fighting to preserve something that could spread to other worlds. Exactly, Elena said. And according to my observations, we don't have much time. The alien forces are massing for a major offensive. They've found some of the dragon colonies and they're preparing to attack them directly. That night, the 4 hybrids and Pyraxis held a war council. They had made contact with 17 other hybrids across the region, but most were still too weak or too frightened to join active resistance. They needed a way to accelerate the awakening process and bring the scattered hybrids together quickly. The answer came from an unexpected source. David, using his electronic abilities, had been monitoring alien communications. He had discovered that the aliens were planning to use a massive energy weapon to sterilize what they believed was the largest dragon colony in North America. The colony was located in a cave system beneath Mount Rainier, less than 100 miles from their current position. The aliens planned to activate their weapon in exactly 10 days. If we can warn the dragons in time, Elena said, we might be able to evacuate them. But Pyraxis had a different idea. Through their connection, he showed them images of what would happen if the energy weapon fired. The explosion would create a massive pulse of the same radiation that had awakened their hybrid abilities. Every person with dormant dragon genes within 1,000 miles would begin changing at once. We're not going to evacuate the colony, Marcus realized. We're going to turn their weapon against them. It's incredibly dangerous, Sarah warned. That much energy could kill us all. Or it could create an army, Elena countered. Marcus looked around at his small group of allies. 4 hybrids and 1 injured dragon against an alien force that had conquered most of the planet. The odds were impossible. But as he thought about all the people out there who were suffering through the same changes he had experienced, all the humans who had rejected them, and all the dragons who had been hiding in the dark for centuries, Marcus made his decision. We're going to Mount Rainier, he said, and we're going to wake up everyone. The journey to Mount Rainier took them 3 days through some of the most dangerous territory on Earth. The alien forces had been busy in the weeks since the initial invasion, transforming the landscape with their twisted technology. Strange metal growth sprouted from the ground like mechanical trees, and the air hummed with energy that made Marcus's newly developed senses ache. But they weren't traveling alone anymore. Word of their mission had spread through the hybrid network that Marcus had established. As they moved south, other changed humans began to join them. Some came alone, others in small groups. By the time they reached the foothills of Mount Rainier, their small band of 4 had grown to over 30. Each new hybrid brought different abilities. There was James, a former electrician whose body could generate and store massive amounts of electrical energy. Maria, a doctor who had discovered she could accelerate healing in herself and others. 2 teenagers, twins named Alex and Alexis, who seemed to share a telepathic link that allowed them to coordinate perfectly in combat. But the most surprising addition to their group wasn't a hybrid at all. They encountered her on the second day of their journey, when they took shelter in an abandoned gas station during a patrol of alien scout ships. Marcus was keeping watch when he saw a figure approaching through the rain, a woman walking calmly down the middle of the highway. Completely unbothered by the alien ships circling overhead, she was tall and elegant, with silver hair that seemed to gleam with its own light. Her eyes were the deep blue-green of ocean depths, and when she smiled at Marcus, he felt a recognition that went deeper than memory. "My name is Tiamat," she said in a voice that sounded like waves breaking on stone. "I am what your friend Paraxis would call an ancient." Paraxis himself confirmed it. Tiamat was one of the original dragons, old enough to remember when the first hybrid bloodlines were created. She had been sleeping in a deep ocean trench for over 2,000 years, but the awakening of so many hybrids at once had stirred her from her rest. "I have come to see if the children of two worlds are ready to reclaim their birthright," she said. Unlike Paraxis, Tiamat could take human form, though Marcus could sense the immense power contained within her seemingly fragile body. She moved like flowing water, and when she touched things, frost formed in patterns that looked almost like scales. "The weapon the Void Seekers plan to use," she explained as they resumed their journey, "is not just destructive. It is a perversion of dragonfire, stolen from our people and twisted into something that destroys rather than creates." "Creates?" Elena asked, her wings flexing nervously as she walked beside the ancient. "Dragonfire is the force of change," Tiamat explained. "It awakens potential, transforms the possible into the actual. The Void Seekers have learned to reverse this process, using it to reduce complex life back to simple elements. This explained why the alien weapon was so effective against dragon colonies. It wasn't just destroying them, it was unmaking them at a fundamental level, erasing them so completely that they couldn't even be remembered properly. But if they could capture the weapon and restore it to its original purpose, we could awaken every hybrid bloodline on Earth at once," Marcus breathed, "and call forth every dragon from their hiding places," Tiamat added. "The question is whether your people are ready for such a transformation." As they got closer to Mount Rainier, that question became increasingly important. The hybrids in their group were changing rapidly, their abilities growing stronger with each passing hour. But they were also becoming less human in ways that sometimes frightened even Marcus. Sarah had developed gills and could now breathe underwater indefinitely, but she was also becoming cold-blooded and needed to bask in sunlight to maintain her energy. David's electronic abilities had grown so powerful that he could disable alien scout drones from a mile away, but he had also begun to speak in binary code when he was concentrating. Elena's wings had grown large enough for true flight, but her bones were now so light that a strong wind could literally blow her away. She had to be careful not to sneeze too hard, or she might accidentally become airborne. The physical changes were manageable. What worried Marcus more were the psychological ones. The hybrids were starting to think differently, to see the world from perspectives that were decidedly non-human. They were becoming something new, something that might not have a place in either human or dragon society. "Change is never without cost," Tiamat said when Marcus shared his concerns with her, "but the alternative is extinction." On the third day, they reached the base of Mount Rainier and got their first close look at the alien weapon. It was enormous, a crystalline structure that rose nearly 1,000 feet into the air. The aliens had built it directly over the entrance to the dragon colony, and Marcus could feel the pain and fear of the dragons trapped beneath it. The weapon was already charging, drawing energy from some source deep within the mountain. "They're using the dragon colony itself as a power source," Tiamat said, her human facade flickering for a moment to reveal something ancient and terrible underneath. "They are feeding on my children's life force to power their weapon of genocide." The alien forces around the weapon were more heavily concentrated than anything the hybrids had encountered before. There were thousands of the armored soldiers they had learned to call Reapers, supported by massive flying machines that could level city blocks with their energy cannons. "How are we supposed to get through all that?" Sarah asked, her gills fluttering nervously. But Marcus was studying the weapon itself, and he was beginning to see a pattern in its construction. The crystalline structure wasn't just a weapon. It was also a cage. The aliens had built it in such a way that it contained and focused the dragon colony's natural energy, preventing the dragons from escaping or fighting back. "We don't fight through them," Marcus said slowly. We turn their own weapon against them. Elena's enhanced vision had spotted something that the others had missed. There are humans down there, she said, pointing to a group of figures near the base of the weapon. They're working with the aliens. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Collaborators. Humans who had chosen to serve the invaders rather than resist them. In exchange for their cooperation, the aliens had given them technology and protection. But seeing them there, helping to prepare a weapon that would destroy Earth's last hope for freedom, filled Marcus with a rage that made his skin glow with heat. Some humans will always choose the easy path, Tiamat said sadly. They see power and want to be on the winning side. Then we show them they picked wrong, Marcus said. The plan they developed was insane, suicidal, and absolutely their only chance of success. They would split into 3 groups. Elena and the other flying hybrids would create a distraction in the air, drawing off the alien flying machines. Sarah and the aquatic hybrids would approach through the underground river system that fed the mountain, coming up inside the dragon colony if possible. Marcus, David, and the remaining hybrids would make a direct assault on the weapon itself, using their combined abilities to overload its control systems and reverse its function. If this works, Tiamat warned them, everything will change. Not just for the hybrids, but for all of humanity. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Marcus looked around at his group of transformed humans. A few months ago, they had been ordinary people living ordinary lives. Now they were something new, something that bridged the gap between 2 ancient species. They were humanity's future, whether humanity wanted them or not. We're as ready as we'll ever be, he said. As the sun set behind Mount Rainier, casting long shadows across the alien encampment, Marcus felt the weight of what they were about to attempt. In a few hours, they would either save both dragons and humans or die in the attempt. But for the first time since the invasion began, he felt hope. Real, genuine hope that Earth might have a future after all. The hybrid army was small, but they were fighting for something the aliens could never understand. They were fighting for the right to exist, to change, to become something greater than what they had been. And sometimes, that was enough. The attack began at midnight, when the alien forces were at their weakest point in their patrol cycle. Elena took to the skies first, her wings carrying her silently through the darkness. Behind her flew 6 other aerial hybrids, each one a master of their own element. There was Marcus Kim, who could generate blinding flashes of light, and Jennifer Walsh, whose body had become so light she could literally ride the wind currents. Their job was to create chaos, and they succeeded beyond all expectations. Elena struck first, diving down on one of the massive alien flying machines and tearing through its hull with claws that had grown stronger than steel. The machine crashed into the mountainside in a ball of flame that lit up the night sky like a second sun. The other flying hybrids followed her lead, attacking the alien aircraft with abilities that the invaders had never encountered before. Marcus Kim strobed like a living strobe light, blinding alien pilots and causing them to crash into each other. Jennifer Walsh created localized tornadoes that sucked smaller alien craft out of the sky. But the real surprise came when the aerial hybrids began to work together. Without any prior coordination, they instinctively began to fly in formation, their individual abilities combining into something much more powerful. Elena's natural leadership merged with Marcus Kim's light manipulation and Jennifer's wind control to create an aerial assault that looked like a living storm. On the ground, David was leading the electronic warfare assault. His ability to interface with alien technology had grown dramatically during their journey, and he was now capable of not just detecting their communications, but actually hacking into their command systems. "I'm in their network," he whispered to Marcus, through their mental link. "These machines are more connected than we thought. If I can find the right access point, I might be able to turn their own defenses against them." David's attack was subtle but devastating. He began by feeding false information into the alien command structure, making their automated defense systems target their own forces. Then he started overloading their power grids, causing sections of their encampment to go dark. Meanwhile, Sarah and her team had found the underground river system that Tiamat had told them about. The water was ice-cold and fast-moving, but Sarah's aquatic adaptations allowed her to navigate it easily. Behind her swam 3 other water-adapted hybrids, including a man named Robert, who had developed sonar abilities like a dolphin. They emerged in a flooded cavern deep beneath Mount Rainier, and what they found there took Sarah's breath away. The dragon colony was vast, stretching for miles through interconnected cave systems. But it wasn't the size that amazed her, it was the beauty. The caves were filled with crystalline formations that glowed with their own inner light, creating an underground landscape that looked like something from a fairy tale. And everywhere, there were dragons, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all trapped by the alien weapon's energy field. They ranged in size from creatures no bigger than house cats to ancient giants that could barely fit in the largest caverns. Some looked like the classical European dragons of human mythology, while others resembled Chinese long dragons, feathered serpents, or creatures that defied any earthly comparison. "The weapon is draining them," Robert reported, his sonar revealing the energy patterns flowing upward toward the surface. "It's literally feeding on their life force." Sarah could see it now, streams of golden energy rising from each dragon, flowing up through the rock toward the crystalline weapon above. The dragons were still alive, but they were weakening rapidly. If the weapon fired as planned, it would consume what remained of their life force in a single massive burst. "We need to break the energy conduits," Sarah said. "Cut the weapon off from its power source." Above ground, Marcus was leading the main assault on the weapon itself. His team had fought their way through the outer perimeter of alien defenses, using their various abilities to devastating effect. James was throwing lightning bolts that could melt through alien armor, while Maria was keeping the team healed and energized with her medical abilities. But as they got closer to the weapon, Marcus realized that the real challenge wasn't the alien defenders. It was the human collaborators. The humans working with the aliens weren't just passive servants. They had been enhanced with alien technology, given cybernetic implants and energy weapons that made them nearly as dangerous as the Reapers themselves. Worse, they knew human tactics and could predict how the hybrids would attack. "You're making a mistake," one of the collaborator leaders called out as Marcus's team approached the weapon's base. "The aliens offer humanity a chance to survive. You're fighting for a dead world." "We're fighting for the right to choose our own future," Marcus replied, his skin glowing with heat as he prepared for battle. The fight that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The enhanced humans moved with inhuman speed and strength, their cybernetic implants allowing them to interface directly with alien weapon systems. But they had traded their humanity for power, and that trade had cost them something essential. The hybrids, by contrast, had gained power by becoming more than human, not less. They fought with an instinctive coordination that the enhanced humans couldn't match, their abilities flowing together like instruments in an orchestra. As the battle raged around the weapon's base, David finally found what he had been looking for, the central control node that regulated the entire system. "I've got it," he announced, "but the security is incredible. I need more processing power to break through." That's when Tiamat revealed her true nature. The elegant woman who had been walking with them for 3 days suddenly began to change. Her human form melted away like ice in the sun, revealing something that defied description. She was enormous, easily as large as the alien weapon itself, with scales that shifted through every color of the spectrum and eyes that held the depth of eternity. But more importantly, her mind was vast beyond human comprehension. When she linked with David's electronic abilities, the young hybrid suddenly had access to computational power that made quantum computers look like pocket calculators. "I can see everything," David gasped as his consciousness expanded to encompass the entire alien network. Their whole command structure, their plans, their weaknesses, everything. With Tiamat's help, David didn't just hack into the weapon's control systems. He rewrote them completely, turning the device from an instrument of genocide into something that would fulfill its original purpose. The change began at the weapon's base and spread upward like wildfire. The crystalline structure that had been designed to unmake Dragonfire began to transform, its alien modifications falling away to reveal the ancient technology beneath. "It's working," Sarah reported from the underground colony. "The energy drain is reversing. The dragons are waking up." But that was only the beginning. As the weapon completed its transformation, it began to pulse with a rhythm that every hybrid on Earth could feel in their bones. The energy that had been stolen from the dragon colony was being amplified and broadcast across the entire continent. Everywhere, humans with dormant dragon genes began to change. In bunkers and safe houses across North America, people who had never shown any signs of hybrid development suddenly found their skin beginning to shimmer. In the ruins of cities, survivors who had been hiding from alien patrols felt new strength flowing through their bodies. And deep beneath the earth and sea, dragons who had been sleeping for centuries began to stir. The real war was about to begin. The sky filled with wings at dawn. Marcus watched from the peak of Mount Rainier as dragons emerged from hiding places all across the continent. They rose from deep ocean trenches, burst out of mountain caves, and climbed up from underground cities that had been hidden for millennia. Some were as small as eagles, others as large as jumbo jets. They came in every color imaginable and some that human eyes had never seen before. But the dragons weren't the only ones taking to the skies. The energy pulse from the transformed weapon had awakened hybrid bloodlines all across North America. Tens of thousands of humans were discovering that they carried the genetic legacy of both species, and their changes were happening at an accelerated rate. Within hours of the pulse, people who had never shown any signs of hybrid development were manifesting abilities that had taken Marcus weeks to develop. The transformation is spreading globally, David reported. His consciousness still expanded through connection with Tiamat's vast mind. I'm detecting similar awakenings in Europe, Asia, Australia. Every continent has dormant dragon colonies, and they're all responding to the call. The alien forces were in complete chaos. Their entire strategy had been based on eliminating the dragons before they could rally their defenses. The Void Seekers had never encountered a world where the dragons had successfully integrated with the local population. They were facing something entirely new. A hybrid species that combined human adaptability with dragon power. Marcus felt a familiar presence approaching and turned to see Pyraxis landing beside him. His friend's wing had healed completely, and he was no longer the wounded creature Marcus had found in that alley weeks ago. Pyraxis was magnificent, his scales gleaming in the morning sunlight, his eyes bright with intelligence and hope. The ancient councils are awakening, Pyraxis told him through their mental link. Dragons who have been sleeping since before your civilization began are stirring. They want to meet the human who helped start this. I didn't start anything, Marcus protested. I just helped one injured dragon. Sometimes that's all it takes, Tiamat said, her voice coming from everywhere and nowhere as her consciousness touched theirs. She had returned to her human form, but remained linked to the global network David had established. One act of kindness, one moment of trust between species. From such small beginnings, worlds can change. As the day progressed, Marcus watched the tide of war shift dramatically. The enhanced humans who had been working with the aliens found themselves abandoned as their alien masters realized they were facing a completely different kind of threat. Many of them tried to surrender to the hybrid forces, claiming they had been forced to collaborate. Marcus felt no sympathy for them. They had chosen to help genocide their own species for the promise of power. Whatever happened to them now was a consequence of that choice. The aliens themselves were beginning a fighting retreat, abandoning their forward positions and falling back toward their massive motherships. But they were finding that the hybrids and dragons could follow them anywhere. Elena and the other aerial hybrids were now capable of flying at altitudes that would have killed them in their human forms, while aquatic hybrids like Sarah were tracking alien submarines through the deepest ocean trenches. They're trying to evacuate, Elena reported during one of her reconnaissance flights, but we're not letting them go easily. The battle that had begun as a desperate defense of Mount Rainier had spread across the globe. Alien forces that had seemed unstoppable just days before were being overwhelmed by an enemy they had never anticipated. Humans and dragons fighting side by side, sharing abilities and knowledge that made them more powerful together than either species could be alone. But the real victory wasn't happening on the battlefields. In cities around the world, humans were discovering that their neighbors, their friends, their family members were changing. The initial fear and panic that Marcus had expected never materialized on a large scale. Instead, there was wonder, excitement, and hope. People are calling it the Great Awakening, David reported as he monitored global communications. Social media is full of videos of people manifesting abilities, families discovering they're all carriers of hybrid genes. There's some fear, but mostly there's joy. Marcus realized why the reaction was so different from what he had experienced. When he had changed, he had been alone, frightened and ignorant of what was happening to him. But now, people were changing together, with support systems and immediate access to information about what they were becoming. More importantly, they could see the results. The alien invasion that had seemed hopeless was being turned back by their transformed neighbors and loved ones. The changes weren't a curse or a disease. They were humanity's salvation. 3 days after the transformation of the weapon, the last alien mothership attempted to leave Earth's atmosphere. It never made it. Elena led a combined force of aerial hybrids and young dragons in an attack that disabled the ship's engines. As it fell back toward Earth, Sarah and her aquatic team guided it down into the Pacific Ocean, where ancient sea dragons helped ensure it would never threaten anyone again. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, Marcus found himself in a position he had never wanted or expected. He was being called a leader of the new world that was emerging. Representatives from human governments that had survived the invasion wanted to meet with him. Dragon councils that predated human civilization requested his presence at their gatherings. "You bridged 2 worlds," Tiamat explained when Marcus protested that he wasn't qualified for such responsibility. "You showed that cooperation was possible when others chose fear. Whether you want it or not, you have become a symbol of what humanity and dragons can accomplish together." The new world wasn't without its challenges. There were humans who refused to accept the changes, who demanded that the hybrids be segregated or controlled. There were dragons who questioned whether humans could be trusted as equals rather than pets or servants. But for every voice of fear and division, there were dozens more calling for unity and cooperation. Children born after the awakening showed hybrid traits from birth, developing abilities that seamlessly blended human and dragon characteristics. Scientists from both species worked together to understand the genetic mechanisms that made the transformation possible. Most importantly, the Earth itself was healing. Dragonfire, it turned out, could do more than awaken hybrid genes. It could cleanse pollution, restore damaged ecosystems, and even reverse some of the environmental damage that human civilization had caused over the centuries. A year after the invasion ended, Marcus stood once again on Mount Rainier. But now he wasn't alone. The mountain had become a symbol of the new alliance between humans and dragons, and hybrid families from around the world came there to celebrate the anniversary of their awakening. Peraxis landed beside him, as he had so many times before. But now Marcus's oldest friend was accompanied by a dozen other dragons, and Marcus himself was no longer the frightened, confused hybrid he had been. His transformation was complete now. He could take dragon form when needed, fly through the clouds, breathe underwater, and channel energies that would have seemed like magic just a year before. "Do you ever regret it?" Peraxis asked him. "Giving up your humanity?" Marcus looked out over the celebration below, where human children played with young dragons, where families that spanned both species shared meals and stories, where scientists and artists from 2 civilizations worked together to build something neither could have achieved alone. "I didn't give up my humanity," Marcus said. "I expanded it. The future was still uncertain. There would be other challenges, other enemies, other difficult choices to make. But humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had allies now, partners who had waited thousands of years for them to be ready. And it had all started with one simple act. And you, outcast human feeding an injured dragon. Sometimes the smallest kindnesses really do change the world."